Yo guys, I hope everybody's staying safe and well and all that. Before we begin today, I want to give a shout out to my editor, Mr. DeLorean. You see, I wanted to get the Monster Hunter Rise review out a lot sooner, and it turns out that when we were in the process of working in that video, he was setting up for his high school graduation, which I didn't know at the time. So when he told me, I just gave him the wiggle room he needed to finish up with school and focus on the video second, because, you know, education is important and all that shit. So once the video got done, we just added some notations here and there to make up for the time gap between when I recorded all the stuff and when the video actually came out. But either way, this point is to just say that my boy graduated. Congratulations, man. I'm proud of you, and hopefully we can look forward to some continued collaborations moving forward. Now on to business. I mentioned more than a few videos back that I was anticipating the release of the PS5, and the PS5 finally came out, but I was too busy enjoying the PS5 to make any videos from anything on the PS5. So I figured let's go ahead and take that box off. Now, there's two gaming companies that I love and revere more than any other, and that's Capcom and Sega. Now, those two companies respectively have given me plenty to enjoy since the system came out, between, you know, the Devil May Cry's, the Monster Hunters, the Judgments, and Yakuza's. But today, I bring you a review of one of my most anticipated games of the year, which was Resident Evil Village, the latest entry in the legendary survival horror series. So without further ado, here is my review for Resident Evil Village on the PS5. So Resident Evil Village takes place a couple of years after Resident Evil 7, and it sees the returning survivor Ethan Winters chilling in a nice new home somewhere out in Europe with Mia and their creepy looking baby. Yeah, I said it. After what happened in 7, Chris Redfield had the BSAA relocate the Winters family and gave Ethan a little bit of military training, just because. Everything seems chill despite Mia reading Tim Burton fanfic stories to the baby, and Ethan apparently constantly bringing up what happened at the Baker's mansion, much to Mia's protesting when...
Oh God. What? Why?
Enter Chris himself. If you saw the original trailer for Village, then I'm sure you'll remember.
Sorry, Ethan.
And after this, his unit knocks out Ethan and snatches the Winters family up in the middle of the night. Next thing you know, Ethan's waking up on a snow-covered road with the truck he was in wrecked on the trail. He then makes his way to the eponymous village where he gets to meet the locals.
No, friendly. What's going on?
And after finding a few more survivors and promptly watching them get into a really cryptic prayer circle right before one of them turns and proceeds to tear everyone else apart, except for Elena, and she seems nice. Well, never mind that. You start making your way up to this castle in the distance, and don't get very far before you run into this guy that looks a whole lot like Maximilian Dude, who snatches you up all Magneto style and brings you before the family of Mother Miranda, a lovely little group of horror movie rejects who are currently in the middle of deciding what to do with you. Miranda gives the guy that caught you the right to dispose of you, and so decides it would be fun to give you a head start before feeding you to his lichen minions, cause, you know, letting your prey run on purpose has worked out for any villain ever in the long run.
I said, get the fuck out of here, you chicken fuck! Run, Forrest! Run!
Naturally, you escape and end up back where you were before, but not before running into the Duke, this game's version of that guy from Resident Evil 4. You know the one. Hell, he even references him at one point.
What are you buying? Just something an old friend of mine used to say.
What are you buying? Is that all, stranger?
That's not even a spoiler. If you like Resident Evil and are playing this game, I'm willing to bet money you've said this line at some point. Argue with yourself. I don't make the rules here. We all know you did it. After this, you get into the castle and once again get snatched up by the daughters of Lady Dimitrescu. You know, the person on the internet that everybody simped for leading up to the release? Well, she does the same thing Heisenberg did and basically gives you a free chance to escape, but not before hanging you on some meat hooks. And as I said that out loud, I know they had a crossover and everything, but damn it, I'm playing Resident Evil, not Dead by Daylight. What gives? After escaping, you proceed to explore the castle, destroy Lady Dimitrescu's daughters, before eventually taking her down along with every simp on the internet's hopes that there was more to her in this game. And if you didn't play this game yet, No, I'm not sorry that I spoiled the fact you have to kill your tall, thick, Dami Mommy vampire in the first 2 hours of the game. You'll find another waifu. After killing Lady D, you find a weird flask, and once you reconvene with the Duke afterward, you're made aware that it contains a piece of Ethan's daughter Rose. Yeah, it turns out for some reason they tore her apart like an old Cabbage Patch doll and stuck her pieces in 4 separate flasks, and the other 3 are in the possession of Mother Miranda's lords. Lady Dimitrescu, who you and everybody else on the internet were already familiar with, Donna Beneviento, the creepy black dress puppet lady, Moreau, the fishy Quasimodo of the bunch, and Heisenberg, the Maximilian Magneto dude, and definitely not this Heisenberg, who also happens to be touted as the strongest of the 4. With this info, and the Duke giving you the locations of the other lords, you set about uprooting Mother Miranda's family to get back the other pieces of Rose to bring her back to life, because apparently that's doable, and of course the Duke knows how to do it. But don't get too into why he knows that. He's on a comparable level of mysterious to the merchant from Resident Evil 4. But anywho, the bulk of the game hereafter centers on you traveling to the different areas of the village and killing the lords, as I mentioned before, and every lord has their own unique of horror brought to the table. Donna's section sees all your equipment confiscated and solving puzzles while being spammed with visions of Mia to play with your sanity before finally confronting Donna and her Annabelle ripoff doll Angie. Basically, you do a Where's Waldo looking for the one porcelain doll in the sea of dolls staring at you all over the house, and every time you find her,
Fucking monster.
and you repeat the process until she's dead. Moreau's section is pretty straightforward also. It's a quick trip through some lichen-filled caves before you confront this nasty-looking parasitic fish dude, who then turns into a giant monster fish, and you have to basically do an obstacle course to get across and turn on the power in the area. Then you drain the water in the area and get up close and personal to finish the job. But in between that, you actually run into Chris for the first time since... where he basically calls you a scrub and says you're out of your league, leave it to the pros, before disappearing once Moreau breaks up the reunion. But after finishing Moreau, Heisenberg contacts you and tells you to come find him in his factory, where he spends his time making cyborg lichen monstrosities. To get there, you need to go through some caves and ruins, where he leaves the final flask for you to find. It just so happens to also give you some weird visions of Mother Miranda at the crash site where you originally showed up in the village, and as thanks for giving you the final flask and allowing you to come into his facility, Heisenberg tries to recruit you to help him usurp Mother Miranda, which, as a Dragon Ball fan, gave me vibes of Zarbon and Dodoria trying to get Vegeta to join him to fight Frieza. Oh, and he also has this one monster in his basement that's built like Nemesis, if Nemesis's upper body was a jet engine with propeller blades made out of chainsaws. Fun. Eventually, after making your way through the factory and killing this thing, Heisenberg transforms and goes on a rampage. You narrowly escape to find Chris once more in the basement of the factory, building this super tank thing that's made out of a metal polymer composite or whatever that Heisenberg apparently can't manipulate for an upcoming fight. It's at this moment that he reveals to you that he never shot Mia in the beginning of the game. That was Mother Miranda. According to Chris, she has the ability to shapeshift, so she impersonated Mia to get close enough to kidnap Rose. You see, Miranda has an obsessive interest in Rose, which is brought up often in the story, because Rose, after being the offspring of people who were affected by Evelyn in the last game, meets the requirements for Miranda to revive her own child, which she lost more than 100 years ago. Chris tried to eliminate Miranda and move the Winters family, but Miranda, posing as a corpse, destroyed the transport after they left, and made off with Rose, essentially setting her plans into motion. So Chris leaves you with the tank while he plans bombs to destroy the factory, and you go off to fight Heisenberg. And after the first phase of the fight, the factory goes up in flames, to which Heisenberg can only say,
Why am I warning? That boulder punching asshole! But you're first!
First time I heard this, I actually paused and chuckled for a good minute because leave it to Capcom to capitalize on the biggest meme of their series next to Jill Sandwich and Master of Unlocking. After which you proceed to end him. But there's little room to celebrate as Miranda shows up in the aftermath and gives you some cryptic rhetoric about how her plans are almost complete before...
I will make sure to sample your blood for later.
And leaving Ethan to die. At this point, the story shifts to Chris giving his summary of events leading up to now and pondering when exactly all this craziness will come to an end before he gears up with his BSAA team and moves into action. And let me just tell you, Chris's section is... satisfying, I want to say. He eventually finds this thing called the Megamycete, which is not only the source of everything going on here, but also the events of RE7 after experiments and mutations of this thing's mold created Evelyn and everything that followed that. Immediately, Chris plants a bomb on the Megamycete before moving to finish Miranda off, and in the process he finds an underground lab of Miranda's containing data on the Lords and all their mutations, her own personal accounts of finding the Megamycete, how she used it to create these parasites called Kato, which is what created literally all the enemies in the village, and get this, a letter from Oswell E. Spencer, the founder of Umbrella. You know, that guy who created the progenitor virus, which led to just about every other instance of bioterrorism in the series. That Spencer. It turns out he once visited this village after Miranda found him about to die in the mountains on an expedition, and after gaining knowledge and inspiration from Miranda, went on to create Umbrella and the progenitor virus, and in turn making this village, seemingly unrelated to the entire franchise, more rooted in the origins of said franchise than literally anyone could have gleaned from any information given about the game before it released. Yet it all happened so fast, and if you're not inclined to read any of the notes strewn about the tables in the lab, you'll totally miss this, and that's just wild to me. And again, you're given little time to process what's going on when you find Mia, the real Mia, alive in a cell in the lab. She says she was taken, although she doesn't really specify how long ago, and experimented on while Miranda was setting up her grand scheme. And after being informed by Chris that Ethan died, she takes pause before telling Chris that he has no idea how truly special Ethan is, and she went to great lengths to keep it a secret, even from Ethan. Then we switch back to Ethan, who's apparently not dead, but as he wakes, he's visited by the spirit of Evelyn, who reveals that Ethan wasn't killed by Miranda. No, it turns out that he's always been dead, because Jack Baker truly killed him back in RE7, but his body had been revived by the mold and now is entirely comprised of said mold, which I'm sure was supposed to be more shocking, but all I could think about when I found that out was how Mia did the do with a mold man and had a baby. How the hell does that work? Anyway, his vision blacks out and he wakes up for real in the back of the Duke's wagon. He was having a dream, but the truth is still the same, and Ethan requests that the Duke drops him off at Miranda's doorstep, to which the Duke replies that he was already on the way because he was expecting Ethan to ask just that. He drops him off and says his goodbyes before Ethan walks into Miranda's ceremony site and confronts her for the last time, killing her and saving Rose. But Ethan's body is at its limit, the battle draining what little strength he has and causing his body to decay and crumble away. Chris shows up at the last second and tries to help Ethan out, but then the Megamycete rises up out of the ground and tries to cut them off. Ethan gives Rose to Chris, takes the detonator for the bomb that Chris set, and sends them off. He returns to the Megamycete and takes one last look before setting the bomb off. At the same time, Chris makes it back to the plane and they take off. But just as Mia is pleading with Chris to tell her where Ethan is, the explosion goes off in the distance and they're left to mourn Ethan's loss. Also, after examining one of the courses from the backup the BSAA sent in at the 11th hour, they turn out to be bioweapons. See, if you didn't play the Not a Hero DLC in 7, it's explained that Umbrella has been reborn as a PMC that has joined forces with the BSAA, which is a decision that Chris is understandably skeptical of. So fast forward to this revelation on the helicopter, Chris takes one good look, plots a course for BSAA Europe headquarters, and says that someone has to pay for this. But we never see what comes from that, as after the credits roll, we're met with an end credit scene where Rose is all grown up now visiting Ethan's grave before being picked up by some agents at the behest of Chris. And we see the car ride off into the distance while it appears someone is moving next to them, which is kind of strange. But that's the story of Resident Evil Village, people. I gotta say, while there was a lot going on, the pacing is non-stop.
One speed, I have one gear. Go!
I did my first playthrough of this game on the hard mode in about 9 hours, and the playthrough I recorded for this review was even shorter than that, less than 7 hours on normal difficulty. I'm more than certain people are already putting those times to shame, but still, this game clocks about the same length as most other Resident Evil games. It's a decent story, but there were things I questioned as I saw them. The Mold Man baby was one, definitely, but I also kind of thought it was weird how Ethan was never more angry to see Chris. I mean, sure he was, I guess, but for as little as we see him until the final chapters of the game, Ethan never sounds more than just highly frustrated with him. Bro, for all we know, he killed your wife.
It'd be a shame if something happened to you now.
Sure, Chris. Why not? You killed Mia. Now do me and finish the job.
And all you got to say is,
What? Why?
and while we're talking about Chris, how about how he never felt the need to tell Ethan what was going on? And I mean, yeah, he tries to explain that away by saying there wasn't really a lot of time to explain it to Ethan, but I kind of feel like between and
How are you involved?
Leave it alone, Ethan. You are out of your depth.
methinks there was just a little wiggle room to actually get that out and tell Ethan what was going on. Kind of feel like you're full of shit on that one, Chris. It's not the best Resident Evil story, but it does its job well enough to keep you moving to the end. Would I rank this in my top Resident Evil stories? No, actually, I wouldn't. But I enjoyed it all the same. I just haven't seen my top 3 in the series change in a very long time. Also, without much elaboration, much of this game feels like it's trying to recreate that lasting appeal that RE4 has, with set pieces like the village survival bit in the beginning, to it being set in some rural village in Europe. with a bunch of B-movie villains, etc, etc. I don't see this game capturing that lightning in a bottle a second time, but I guess it's gonna be a while before we inevitably hear it come up in some of those conversations in our gaming circles, so who knows, right? But with all that out of the way, let's talk about the gameplay. As I'm sure you're aware, Village retains the first-person perspective of 7 without the VR gimmick, and because of it seems a lot more focused on gameplay feel. A lot of the mechanics are the same, but feel more refined. Movement speed is in Christ, thank you for that by the way, because sprinting in 7 felt more like power walking, and the gunplay is more satisfying. Your aiming speed is also much faster, and you still collect attachments and stuff like that, but they also brought back the whole gun upgrade shop thing with the Duke, feeling that much closer to an homage to the Merchant in Resident Evil 4, as I mentioned before. So there's a lot of experimentation with weapon types as opposed to 7, and a lot of the combat is more hectic. You can tell right away with how much more open the spaces can be in this game that you'll be using that space for, well, spacing, as the Lycans are far more mobile enemies who like giving chase, and they also don't believe in fair ones because they will jump the fuck out of you. So you'll need ammo for your pistols, shotguns, snipers, explosives, the usual fare. They also brought back the whole suitcase inventory management thing from 4, complete with upgrades to suitcase sizes, but I promise you, I have never felt the need to obsess over organizing this thing as much as I did in 4. You just don't collect stuff to that degree in this game, so I don't get the same feeling of where the fuck do I fit all this shit like you're used to from before. But you do find a lot of goodies worth selling, and there's also treasures that combine like in 4, albeit found far less often. And aside from Chris's section where he has no need for it, just about every enemy in this game has drops, whether it be money, crafting materials, or treasures. Speaking of crafting, that's back from 7, but relied upon far more as enemies don't really drop ammo at all. You can occasionally find some later on, but for the most part you're going to be making a ton of bullets in this game if you expect to survive. You also buy crafting recipes from the Duke, so you end up with loads of options for things to craft, and the materials are plentiful between finding them lying around or enemies dropping them, so you never really feel cheated for supplies. Lastly, since I'm playing this on the PS5, I want to talk about the adaptive triggers and how they feel in this. You know, I genuinely think it's kind of hard to actually explain how this thing increases the experience, but the DualSense controller actually makes you feel the weapons in this game. The pistol has a little bit of resistance with the right trigger when you pull it, emulating the feel of shooting a real gun, and the bigger and more destructive the weapon gets, the more this becomes a thing. Even the shotgun or sniper rifle makes you feel the resistance, with them requiring a tighter squeeze of the left trigger to aim down the sights, which gives you the feel that some guns require more control, which is pretty impressive to me. That coupled with the haptic feedback simulates gun recoil, and in a way elevated my experience by making me have to justify to myself in what instance would it make more sense to use a certain gun. And just having that little addition to the experience elevated the feel of the game for me. I'm not usually too into system gimmicks, but this one hits different. I've played multiple games since the PS5 came out where I actually said to myself, this is pretty dope. So with that in mind, I'd say the gameplay overall is pretty solid. Lastly, it goes without saying that Capcom did their thing with the presentation on Village. If you weren't already aware, Capcom's RE engine makes for a visually striking aesthetic in any of the games they've used it in. The environments are crazy detailed, the lighting is incredible, the lack of light can actually create real tension in some of the more claustrophobic areas of the game, and the characters are both appealing and grotesque. Even things like Ethan's mangled, chewed off fingers are crazy detailed, but it still comes off kind of goofy when once again the man can get his whole hand cut off and he can just reattach it for it to start working again in seconds. But not once did I actually complain about the way the game looks. Whether I was walking in the village, the mountain forests, the caves and factories, and especially the castle interior, this game is a sight, I'll say that confidently. Sure, it's far from the best Resident Evil overall, but it's a pretty strong game even if you're not into the whole first person thing, because I've heard that argument so much and I just don't really care for it anymore. But I do believe Resident Evil Village is a very enjoyable, very replayable experience no matter what platform you're on. If you're still hesitant on whether or not you want to play it, I say give it a go. And if you have played it, what are your thoughts? Leave a comment and we can discuss. But as we wrap up this video, I just want to let you know that I'm already hard at work on the next video, so you can look forward to that. Have a great night, everybody. I'll see you on the next one.